Welcome to today's webinar. We've titled it Coaching, the Skill Anyone Can Learn and Everyone Needs. I'm Jack Zenger, and I'm delighted to be joined today by my colleague, Michelle Fabian, who will be the other kind of anchor here on this webinar. We're also happy to have with us Maria Lickert, one of our senior account executives, who will be handling the chat box. So if you have questions or if you have some specific thing that you would like from our organization, she's the one that will kind of assist you. And Maria, you might just want to kind of wave and say hi and let people know who you are, and so they can have a face attached to a name.
Good morning, everyone. As Jack mentioned, please, feel free to chat in the box and I'll respond as quickly as possible and try to get to all of them during the webinar. And if we're unable to get to your question, we'll certainly follow up with you afterwards. Thanks, Jack.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm going to begin today by doing, I guess, what's the logical thing, and that is to focus on the definition and our definition of the term coaching that we will be using throughout this webinar. I think this is especially important because, the reality is when we use the word coach, many of us think of our junior high school athletic coach or our high school coach, or we think of professional coaches today. And I would submit to you that the behavior that we associate with coaches in terms of making all the decisions, pulling people in, pulling people out, putting people in, defining the strategy of the game, that the behavior that we associate with athletic coaches is almost diametrically opposed to what we're going to be talking about in terms of the skill of being an effective coach in a business or an organizational setting. So let me kind of just walk through with you very carefully this definition. We have said that coaching are interactions that help the individual who is being coached to expand their awareness. So it's helping them see their issues from a new depth, from a new, direction, to look at the deeper meanings maybe that they haven't thought about. Then it's to help them discover superior solutions. And I'd like to really emphasize that we define coaching as the coach helping the person being coached to discover new solutions for themselves. And then finally, the definition goes on to say, and make and implement better decisions. So what this clearly signals is that this isn't just the description of a conversation between two people at one moment in time, but it really is a much broader, much more significant relationship and interaction that does those things. So we pause in an unusual kind of way, I guess, on this definition, because it is so different than what we have typically associated. So with that as the background, let's kind of ask you a couple of questions. So Michelle has a couple of questions she'd like to propose to you. And so Michelle, go for it.
Sure. Thank you, Jack, for that definition. And I found myself nodding the whole way through. And I too love the focus on the person being coached, that I kind of in my mental mind went to, they're in the driver's seat. We're there. We're kind of sitting next to them, helping them, providing support and input, but it's really them that ultimately gets to make some choices and decide how they're going to move forward. So great definition. Thank you for kind of breaking it apart for us. So let's get you all involved today, and welcome, by the way. I didn't say hello. I smiled and nodded earlier, but here I am. Our first question for you, the poll should be open for you, is does your organization help managers learn how to initiate effective coaching conversations? If you think about the definition that Jack just shared with us, would you say yes or no to that? So take a moment, weigh in. Here it's popping up. I see it. Jack, what do you think we're going to see?
I think we're going to see maybe about 50-50.
Okay.
I think there's going to be a lot of organizations that are currently doing it, but there's also a lot that, at least from my experience, that aren't doing it. So
Yeah,
we'll
I wonder if we might hear some a little bit stronger on the no side, only based on the definition you just gave of, wait, I might have been sitting in a tell seat for a while or a direct seat for a while, and all of a sudden that new definition might be new for us, says, oh, I'm not sure if we are effectively coaching or just giving direction.
Okay, Terry, can you show us the results?
Ah,
Hey,
yay.
that's very encouraging.
Yeah,
That's
pleasant surprise this
that's
morning.
terrific. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yes. So for somebody, just in case there's somebody out there who maybe isn't seeing the result for some reason, we had 68% of folks, or 67% of folks said, yes, we do believe our managers are getting the help and support in order to have those effective conversations. So we had just over 100 voters, and we've got a 67% saying yes. So that's great. So thank you. Let's throw one more your way. And the second poll question that will be popping up here in a moment is, how effective are most managers in your organization at conducting these coaching conversations? So encouraging us to have them is one thing, being effective is another. And so our three options here are not really doing it, not much time or desire, 50, maybe half of us are effective coaches in our organizations, or the great majority are. So again, take a moment. We'd love to hear your thoughts and perspective. How about this one, Jack?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
It's hard to hard to predict these. I'm thinking that maybe that middle choice, about half are effective coaches.
Half of them. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's more than a few, but I don't think it's always a great majority. We'll see. We'll have to see what people say here.
Hey, let's see.
Oh, well, okay. If you have time, if you spend time or have the desire to coach,
yes,
about half are, and the great majority, that didn't get very many votes, that the great majority are effective coaches.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just read one of the chats, and somebody chatted in and said, I almost want the first one split into two, because time and desire are not exclusive of one another or inclusive of one another. So I might not have the time, and I might not have the desire, or it could be one or the other. So thanks for that feedback. That's a great call out, that might have impacted some of how folks answered as well. So the good news is 45% of folks are believe their organization have half of their folks that are effective coaches, and then there's still some space for us to learn and grow as coaches. So I'm going to close that one out, and Jack, I'm going to hand it back to you for a little bit here.
Yes. This next slide says, why is coaching important? As many of you know, our firm does leadership development programs. We particularly have a world-class 360-degree feedback instrument that gives leaders a pretty accurate view of how they are perceived by their colleagues. And in the early days, many of our clients came to us and said, you've helped us identify needs and opportunities for growth and development, but we don't have any real tools to do that. So, what's next? How can you help us? So I would propose to you that we made this choice for three reasons why we developed this particular program on coaching skills. Really maybe has three important elements to it. One is that, in our opinion, coaching and the proper coaching behavior applies a great deal of what we know about good leadership behavior. It conveys respect, and it conveys an appreciation for the importance of people in the organization. And it operationalizes much of what we know about good leadership. Secondly, we think it's a very critical skill for managers to have for all sorts of reasons. One is for performance management reasons, and secondly, for their development of their subordinates, and so the whole career coaching dimension. And the third really important arena, I think, is that it has some very positive impacts on various business outcomes, things such as engagement and productivity and retention and so forth. And so I'd like to show you just 2 or 3 slides that sort of summarize some of what we've found about the relationship of good coaching behavior and some of these important outcomes. So the first slide I'd like to show you talks about this data point regarding employee engagement, and particularly the employees' willingness to go the extra mile. So what our data indicates is that effective coaches have 4 times as many of their direct reports who say that they are willing to go the extra mile as those who are not the effective coaches. So it's really interesting how being a good coach seems to incentivize people working with you to put forth extra effort. The second thing I'd like to show you is a slide that shows the relationship between employee engagement on the vertical axis is the employee engagement scores, percentiles, and on the horizontal axis is the overall coaching effectiveness of managers. And notice that, you know, it goes from then the bottom 10% of managers have employee engagement scores at the 22nd percentile, and then it moves steadily up and then takes a little bit of a jump. The top 10% have 79% of their employees who would be described as engaged, highly engaged. The next slide I'd like to show you is a little bit about people's expressed desire or thinking about quitting. We know from past research that if people say that they're thinking about quitting, that they, in many cases, end up doing it. And so this is not an unimportant kind of statistic. But as you see here on the horizontal axis, if you look at overall coaching effectiveness, the bottom 10% has 43% of their employees who say that they're thinking about quitting. Whereas as you move up and you get more effective coaching behavior, when you finally get to that top 10%, those managers have only 11% of their employees who are thinking about quitting. We submit to you that those are fairly powerful and compelling reasons why every manager, we've said this is a skill that anybody can learn and everybody needs. This is why we think everybody needs it. So Michelle, help us understand the link between coaching and organizations.
Yeah, before I move to the next slide, I'm just, as I was listening to you and watching the slides and looking out, my career was going in front of my eyes in reflection of, okay, which leaders would I put in which buckets along my journey? And did this hold true for me? And it did, even in my own, one person experience, not an overall number of folks in your database, but when I've made career changes, what was bringing those on and where were they coming from? And how did my own manager impact that? So thank you for sharing that. And hopefully others on the call as well kind of went down a memory lane walk of reflecting on their own experiences. So as you said, Jack, here's a great summary, this slide here, of the data slides that Jack just shared with us in regards to connecting coaching to organizational effectiveness. The why, like why have this matter to us? I hope individually. I love coaching. I'm a big supporter and advocate of it, both on the giving side and the receiving side of it. And within an organization, it becomes very valuable as well. So if we start on the far left here, we see that improved coaching effectiveness. Again, the slides that Jack just shared with us show why when we're better coaches, we get better outcomes. And what does that do for us? It creates that employee engagement. People want to be there. They want to give more. We hear a lot of talk these days about employee engagement. And then we have that second add-on there of discretionary effort. The willing to go the extra mile is one of our measures here at Zenger Folkman as well. And so we know that it increases it. So the better coach I am, the more my employees and team members want to partner with me in that, which then increases for all of us our productivity and our efficiency. So I become a better leader who's able to do more as I coach, and I can do more activities to help my employees. And at the same time, they also are increasing their productivity and efficiency, which ultimately leads us here to the superior organization effectiveness and profitability, which makes everybody happy. Now our employees are happy, the owners are happy, the shareholders are happy, but we're making a better world for all of us when we effectively know how to coach and make a difference. So Jack, take us down, kind of circle us back to our definition of coaching and how we kind of think about it bigger than that just sports analogy. And we have some great examples here of what that might. Oh, actually, I said I would take this one. Let me keep going. Jack's probably panicking right now going, wait, Michelle, you're supposed to do this slide. I'm here, I'm taking it. So I'll build on Jack and what Jack shared during the definition piece. And so we have this, what we like to call an expanded view. So it's more than that I'm telling. It's more than I'm directing. It is bringing that coaching client, the person being coached, into it. And here are 4 potential ways that coaching can be viewed and used in our organizations. Performance coaching. That is what we like to think of. I'm in my role today, and maybe there is something that I could be doing differently or better. And coaching does fit in that. Unfortunately, many times we stop there. We see coaching. In fact, I saw in one of the comments when I could peek over, I'm not able to catch all the comments like Maria is, but every once in a while I'm catching one. And I saw somebody say in their organization, it's used, probably sounded like in this performance coaching only, that it's used as reprimanding, as holding people accountable for things that aren't going well. And so we want to expand beyond that. And so then you see career coaching. So how do we help others develop as coaches, whether that's growing in the role they're in today or growing into a future role? I reflect back on a leader I worked for early in my career, and there were 8 of us that reported to her. And in a 3-year window, she was so great at career coaching. She got 5 of her employees promoted into more senior roles. And I remember sitting back. I don't know if I would have called it coaching back then. I'm not sure I had that language. But I can reflect back now and go, oh, that's exactly what she was doing. I knew it was phenomenal to be able to get 5 of 8 people promoted through the way she was able to connect and help them grow. So I would put that under career coaching as an example. Developmental coaching. So we cover that one through several things: maximizing, initiating, or ceasing, right? So a combination of let's take you to the next level in the things you're doing and develop you further. Let's get you going, starting to do something new that maybe you aren't doing today in order to help you grow. Or maybe there is something that's getting in your way that if tweaked and approached in a different way could help you grow even more. And then our last one on the list here is it can be very helpful in difficult situations. So having this framework that you're going to see us present in a little bit, and having a way to think about, boy, there are sticky, tough conversations that we find ourselves needing to have sometimes, but what if I had some tools and resources to help me with that? And this idea of, as a coach, my goal is to help the person make decisions for themselves so that they can grow and move forward. It could be very helpful there. Jack, anything you want to add to any of the 4, or an example you'd like to share?
No, I think you've covered it. No, it's good.
Okay. Yeah, so hopefully we're expanding your view as well of how you use it. And I would ask, and Maria can share it with me later, if you have another expanded view beyond what I just shared, I'd love to see that and come through in the chat later. I won't be able to see it right now, but I'd love to catch it later. So Jack mentioned that we have a program called the Extraordinary Coach, and you're getting here a quick preview on this slide of what our development experience looks like from the Extraordinary Coach perspective. I'm going to touch on these high level here. We'll dig into a few of them a little bit deeper throughout the time we have today. The first thing that occurs for our participants is an opportunity to do a self-assessment where they get to think about and answer questions for themselves only on their coaching style. And it creates some space for us right at the beginning of our session to say, boy, what do I do from a coaching perspective today? Where do I fit on a scale and on a skill level and my thought process and approach to it? We also know that two of the most important skills as a coach are listening and asking questions. And we see them as married together, but also separate skills. And so Jack's going to talk about those in a second. We do have something called the Fuel Coaching Framework. I'll explain what that is in a bit when I have a more expanded slide, but the Fuel is an acronym that stands for our framework for coaching. So we introduce our participants to that. And then they get to practice multiple times through the session based on examples that they've brought. And we close out our session with every participant putting together an action plan that is, when would they like to have a conversation with somebody? Who will it be with? What does it look like? And again, I'll show you a sample plan in a little bit, but we really try to help people both learn the skill of coaching in that session and also start applying it so that they can go out and be as effective as possible. So like I said, Jack and I will dig into each of these a bit more as we introduce. The one I do want to first just talk about a little bit, and this is what it kind of looks like from a front sheet perspective. So that coaching preferences, self-assessment, and report. What that measures is the aspect of your coaching preference. So naturally, how do I operate in a coaching conversation? So I get a chance to really just self-reflect, and then I get that report during the class so I can use it to help me put together an action plan. You'll see that second bullet there. What it is not is how effective I am. The way to know that would be to ask other people if I'm effective or not. And we actually have a worksheet for folks to be able to do that I'll show you in a little while. So at this point, it's a self-assessment. How do I think I'm doing? And if I really wanted to know, I'd want to invite others in. So Jack, why don't you take the next one around two of those foundational skills?
So we want to just emphasize that we understand that the skill of coaching really has two kind of bedrock foundational stones, and they are the practices of listening and also asking better questions. Now, it happens that we've written a couple of articles about listening that Harvard Business Review has published and republished. And one of the metaphors that we used in that article about what does a good listener really do was the idea that a good listener isn't just a person who doesn't talk when you do, isn't just a person who can repeat back to you exactly what you just said. They're not a sponge that just takes in information and absorbs it. But instead, they really serve as a trampoline. That the interaction between the person being coached and the coach is that the coach enables the conversation to be energized and elevated and to become more valuable. And just as a trampoline kind of propels a person higher than they would normally be able to just jump on their own, the coaching relationship really is a trampoline for understanding what the person really is thinking about and what they're feeling. And the second kind of bedrock skill is the skill of asking better questions. I don't know how many of you on the call have heard of a fellow named David Brooke, who has written a book called How to Know a Person. He's a New York Times columnist who writes really extremely well. And in his book, he talks a lot about how what he observes is that when he gets to know people, it's because he asks them questions and they ask him questions. And it's the quality of those questions that really leads to a better understanding of that individual. So I think we do attempt in this development session we have to help people understand the importance of listening skills and how they can sharpen and hone and maybe get better at that. And I do believe that people can get better at listening. And at the same time, the counterpart to that is the ability and willingness and thoughtfulness about the kind of questions that you pose to people that really do fulfill those objectives of expanding awareness, helping people see things with a new perspective, helping people discover new things within themselves, helping them kind of think about the decisions they're about to make, and therefore to make a better decision, and then to help them in implementing that decision. Those are the foundational skills.
Yeah. I love that, Jack, with the trampoline idea and helping propel people forward. I'm gonna use that instead of what I notice with folks when I've done my coaching well with them is they'll say, why do I feel like I'm on a therapist's couch with you right now, Michelle? And I'll say, I don't know. I guess this is going well. But somehow the trampoline maybe is better than being on the couch. So I'm going to think about that instead. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay, the next slide talks about our strong belief that coaching is a learnable skill. As maybe you can tell, I'm not a spring chicken, so I remember very well the days in the 1950s when the notion of behavior modeling became more accepted and understood. Behavior modeling, it was a theory about how you help people acquire a skill. It really kind of originated with a man named Albert Bandura, who was a professor at Stanford University, who wrote a book called Social Learning Theory that has had a profound influence on learning and behavior change. But what he proposed was that there are some key elements that need to be in place for a skill to be learned. And so in summary, let me kind of explain to you what they are. Number one is that you need to identify what are the key elements in a behavior that you want people to learn. And so if you can identify them, spell them out, the more precise you can be about these are the key steps that are required when you're having a discussion with someone about their performance or about their career or about some behavior that needs to be changed. The second thing that he proposed is that it's really powerful if people can see a good example. And so the value and the importance of someone doing it right. Most of us know that the way you teach a child to eat properly or to dress themselves is that they watch their parents do it and they mimic them. And so the child learns how to use a spoon and a fork and by watching how their parents can eat. Having a good example in a more complex situation is really, really helpful. And it's even helpful to have maybe a couple of different examples of people doing it in different contexts and with different approaches, different styles. The third key element, and we can't emphasize this too much, and that is practice. There's no substitute for, okay, so I know what I'm supposed to do. I watched somebody else do it. Now, if I'm going to acquire that skill, I absolutely have to do it myself. And the opportunity to do it is really key. And I think that the huge contribution of the whole behavior modeling movement in the 1950s was moving away from the theoretical classes where you'd get a bunch of supervisors into a room and talk to them about planning and organizing and staffing and controlling and directing, as if that was going to change their behavior. No. Instead, show them a video of a supervisor handling a difficult situation really well, and one that each participant could relate with. And then identifying a situation that they faced back home that was similar, have them practice that. And then the next step was that they get feedback from the people that they're working with on what they did well and what maybe fine-tuning points they could make to have it even be better. And that whole process of what are the key elements, a chance to see examples, chance to practice, chance to get feedback, all results then in the individual having two things occur. One is that they gain competence, that is, now they can do it. But there are things that I can do, but if I'm not really confident about my ability to do it, if I'm not confident that I can do it in difficult situations, then chances are I won't even try. And so what you're basically trying to do is to get everyone to feel both competent and also with enough self-assurance, with enough practice that they say, okay, I am willing now to try this with one of my colleagues, one of the people that reports to me, and I'll practice that new behavior. We think that is just the fundamental bedrock on which all of this process rests.
That's great. Thank you, Jack. That was a great walkthrough of that. And yes, that both of those C's at the end, competence and confidence, are both so valuable and important. And so that's what we've tried to create, right, through our development experience. And one of the great things I appreciate about what you just shared was it's learnable. I saw that at the heading of the thing. It's learnable. So we can all do it. It's not you have to be born as a coach. It is possible to learn these skills and use them. And here's a framework that we use. And this is, I showed you that earlier on the slide, FUEL, and we can see here what that stands for. So it's a model with which to help us engage in the different types of coaching conversations. We believe that it's easy to remember. It can be applied to all of the different expanded views that we looked at earlier and in all sorts of different environments. I jokingly say to my family and friends more than to my colleagues, yes, I'm using the same skills at work on you at home. So, and sometimes they ask me, they're like, are you doing that coaching thing to me right now? And I'm like, will it make a difference if I say yes or no to you right now? So I like to think of these as life skills as much as kind of work skills, right? And organization skills. So you just have to be a little more careful at home because sometimes they pick up on it for some reason that you're doing it. So, and I like that last bullet. It's flexible. So we call it a framework. We like to think of it as a framework. It's not a cage. It's not you have to do it in this order all the time. Now, having said that, I will do a slight plug and say framing the conversation probably is important to do first in these dialogues and in our coaching conversations. The rest of it, though, you can move around in it as a framework, and you might start down the path of understanding and exploring, but then you weave your way back up to trying to understand some more. So I like the simplicity of being able to kind of move around within our framework of FUEL in order to help people really be good coaches, but also to get what they need out of a coaching conversation. So I'm going to take it one step further. And yes, we introduced the FUEL model. And oh, by the way, I know I heard Jack plug a couple of other people and authors. I'm going to plug Jack for a second here. He and Kathleen Stinnett wrote a book called The Extraordinary Coach that is based on our FUEL model. So if that is a way you like to learn and do things, go grab a copy of the book somewhere out in the world where it's available, how you like to read and capture things. So I'll build a bit here on what Jack mentioned around good video examples, and we do have that built into our program and giving folks the opportunity to see FUEL in action. And so one of the things that I really appreciate is that it is in a business setting, and we get to see two types of approaches. We first get to see somebody learning what it would look like to do coaching through I'll call her the manager, kind of role modeling the behavior for the person who's trying to learn what it means to use FUEL and how to maybe go about that conversation. And then he turns around and shares and does what he's learned with his employee as he's doing a coaching conversation with that individual. So we have some really great video examples, and we heard why with the advantage of video modeling that Jack talked about. Getting to see people practice it is really, really helpful, and getting to see what good looks like is an accelerator for folks learning. Another element is that piece to build off of what Jack said, rehearse and practice. And so bullet number 2 there, it's not a role play. How many of us, right? You can all virtually raise your hand out there with me. How many of us have been to role plays where you've been given kind of this idea of, here, go be this person and go act out this thing. And we have moved to what we like to call real play. So participants bring with 2 real examples that they would like to be coached on, where they feel stuck and could use some help. And they get, I say they get free coaching in the session, and then other people are getting to practice their coaching skills. So it's a great way to pair folks up. And it works both virtually and in person when we deliver these sessions. And then that last bullet was Jack's last triangle of, it builds their confidence and competence when they can start to see themselves practicing coaching and the person responding right in the moment. And the person's able to do that because it's their real information and content, not some role play data that's been given to them. So it's a great way for folks to build that confidence and competence before they ever walk out the door. Jack, before I go into kind of some of our handouts, since you kind of touched on some of those too, anything you'd like to add about the fuel model or the last couple of slides? No?
No, but as we move forward on this next slide, let me just report that when Kathleen and I were writing the book, one of the things I took upon myself was to say, we're not the only people who are trying to create helping, productive discussions. And so I tried to read the literature in social work, in clinical psychology, in anything having to do with conversations that therapists have with people. And one of the things that we came upon was this notion of the very best clinical psychologists were handing to their client a list of topics that they may want to kind of have conversations about. So this next slide in this coaching topic checklist.
Yeah.
Sometimes if a manager is wanting to have a meaningful coaching relationship with a direct report, often that person may not really have thought about it and not really had the perspective of, well, what might I be able to talk about with my manager? And so this coaching topic checklist is an extremely valuable device that says, let us help you expand your thinking about what you and I might periodically, going to talk about in terms of your development, in terms of your performance, in terms of your long-term career. So I just think that there's something really valuable about this coaching topic checklist, which I shamelessly borrowed from the world of clinical psychology among those people who were having the greatest success. So I tried to find those people that there were studies about them where they were having the highest success rates.
Sure. And talk about a great opportunity, again, to put the person who is getting coaching back in the driver's seat of what's most important to them and what will be valuable for them versus what I, as a coach, am saying, hey, here's what we should talk about, or here's what I'd like for us to talk about. So we just keep coming back to that definition and putting that coaching client in the hot seat or the driver's seat, or however we want to look at that. So that's great. Love that. And I didn't know the history of that, of you kind of taking it from that. So it's fun to get to hear that as well. So talk to us a little bit about this one as well. How does this one work?
We've become very enamored of late about the extreme value of people who are in power positions, kind of asking for feedback from people with whom they work. And nothing would be a better opportunity than if you are engaged in some coaching conversation with somebody to then ask them at the end of that conversation, give me some feedback on, and so there are some very useful questions here about, was the time well spent? Were we focused on things that were really important to you? Are you leaving with a clear, set of action steps to take? So these are just some very wonderful questions that would be of great value to the coach about helping them constantly get better. And I think what's particularly powerful about this to me is that the coaching relationship is a discussion or a dialogue between people that clearly is meant to help the coachee improve their life and their performance and their behavior and their career. But nothing signals that in a more powerful way than when the coach shows and demonstrates his or her wanting to get better and improve, and then not just rest on their laurels and say, well, you know, I am the manager and therefore everything is okay. So this coaching feedback is, I think, it's an interesting feature of our program, and it's deliberately there because it sends a signal to both parties, and it's a powerful example of continuous improvement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And it answers or fills in, not answers, it fills in from the self-assessment I talked about a little earlier of we're getting to measure how we think we're doing as the coach. This is the other side of that where, okay, I might think I'm doing really well. Let me ask the people on the receiving end of my coaching, how effective am I actually? So it's creating that space to get both perspectives, my own and the person or people that I've coached along the way. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Jack, for sharing a bit about that. So let me bring back in our fuel model framework, and one of the additional resources we have in the program is we've taken the framework, put it here. You can kind of see a screenshot down the left side. And then we have added some prompts to help people. So in that beginning stage, again, where it's hard sometimes for us to be learners, especially if we're been at it for a while. I always say coming out of school, we're used to being a learner, and we're used to kind of that process of trying on new things and walking into it. Sometimes at work, what happens is we forget what it's like to be a learner. And so we really try to also think about if I'm picking up a new skill here, or if it's been a while, or maybe I'm needing a mind shift change of what coaching really means to me. We want to help people feel successful in the beginning until they find their own groove and they find their own way to make it their own. And so we have created what we call our Fuel Coaching Guide that gives folks those prompts that they might use to start their fuel coaching conversations as they're practicing. And that can be true both in the classroom when we're doing the real plays, and also as they leave and go out with that action plan into the real world environment to do it. So having mentioned that action plan, that is one of our staples of our program as well, is to have folks have a plan. We know we get back to our desks, we get back to our environments, whatever that looks like for us, and we quickly fall back into our standard days of running our habits and our rituals and our meetings and whatever else we might be doing. So we spend some time in the session to create an action plan, and we do two things. We provide a blank action plan and for them to fill out, and then we also have a sample action plan to give folks a peek at. And you'll see at the bottom of this action plan that we have fuel still right there front and center to really help people learn the model and start to get comfortable with that. And so we kind of carry it all the way through, and then I won't read this to you. You can kind of peek at it if it's big enough on your screen, but it's just more to show you that we believe that this is also a feature that sets us apart, is we don't just say, okay, check the box, I learned something new today, but we're trying to work on that competence and confidence that we're talking about and have people feel successful as they walk away from the session feeling like, I can do this. I can make this a part of my day-to-day. And if we're going to give one last one to show you, and then I'll hand it back over to Jack for us to do another poll. One other item that we have available is what we like to call our coaching self-reflection. So we know for us to be better as individuals and in this arena of coaching, that it's really valuable for us to reflect back, not just ask. So we have the option of asking the person we coached for feedback, and that's great. And what if we had that, and I took the time as a coach to do a little self-reflection, and did those two things marry up, right? Is what I thought, how it went, the feedback they're giving me, and what might it look like for me to take 5 or 10 minutes after a coaching session to reflect on how I did and how it went and what would I want to reproduce in future conversations, what would I want to not do again in the future if I felt like it didn't go well. So we do have this resource available for our coaches as well to really check in and see how they're doing. So with
Okay.
that, yeah, go for it,
Yeah.
Jack.
As we wind up this webinar today, we'd like to have you participate in one last poll. As you recall, in our very first polls, we indicated, or you indicated, that 2/3 of the people were doing, we're having coaching conversations, but that there was about a third that weren't. So maybe this focuses on that third that are not. And the question is, what are the biggest coaching barriers that managers have in your organization? Mark all that apply. So we've cut off that heading up there. So what it reads is, or what it should read, what are the biggest coaching barriers for managers in your organization? Mark all that apply. So if you would, please just jump in and respond to that poll. And I'd like to reflect with you on your answers. What do you think, Michelle? What's going to be the hit parade winner here?
Yeah, they get to vote for as many as they want. So that throws an interesting spin in it. A while back, I would have said number 2, coaching takes too much time. I do believe people are starting to shift that and understand that it doesn't have to be a sit down 1-hour conversation. Yeah. It can be quick, it can be fast, it can be in the moment. So I'm curious to see how much that's going to show up here, if my theory of it's shifting changes at all.
Yeah, I've got a story to tell you about that. So yeah, we'll so I don't know how we're doing here in terms of responses. Oh, we're about to
see. There we go.
Okay, so taking too much time is the hit parade winner. So it looks like all of those are things that you feel hold people back. So let me just conclude our webinar maybe today, or our portion of it, before I turn it over to Maria. I hope that we've dispelled that notion that coaching is about the coach having the answers. Good coaches don't have all the answers. There are moments in time when, after you help the person explore all that they're thinking, that you may want to add some of your ideas or your thoughts. You shouldn't be just, a bump on a log. But I hope we've dispelled the idea that coaching means having all the answers and giving advice. I wanted to say a word or two about the second one, about coaching takes too much time. On several occasions, I, with groups of people, have said to them, how many of you have had a meaningful coaching conversation with a boss in your career in the past? And usually most people will raise their hand. And then I've asked them, this is the second question, the follow-up question. As best you can recall, how long was that conversation? How long was that time? And it is fascinating to me that the most frequently selected time was 15 minutes.
Yeah.
15 minutes was the average time of these most memorable conversations that people had with their bosses in their careers. So I'm not saying every coaching conversation can be done in 15 minutes. I'm just saying that the belief, or and I think maybe it's an excuse, that coaching takes an inordinate amount of our time is one that we all need to rethink, and maybe just challenge a little bit and saying, this doesn't need to be a 20, 30, 40, 50-minute conversation. Good coaching often occurs in short bursts at appropriate moments in time. On point number 3, I would hope that we help people to learn to ask permission if they're wanting to give difficult feedback to somebody. And so I think that there are ways of getting around this. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if people really want to hear what they need to hear or should hear. And then the fourth one about people are uncomfortable about setting themselves up as advice givers. And
Hmm.
that's wonderful, because being a good coach is not necessarily being a person who gives advice.
Yeah.
With that, let me now turn to just saying one more summary, that we believe that this next slide about Zenger Folkman's philosophy of we believe that this is a learnable skill, and it's it's once owned by a leader, it becomes a way of being. It's like learning how to ride a bike. It stays with you as a rule throughout most of your life. It is true that leaders need to unlearn sometimes as much as they learn. And yes, there are a number of people whose past history has been to give advice, to direct, to tell, but we can unlearn that behavior and learn to kind of practice what we've described here as really ideal coaching behavior. And so we hope that we've given you a picture of what a program that really teaches that skill can look like. So again, thanks to all of you who have participated in this. I'd now like to turn the time to Maria and let her kind of just wind things up here.
Thank you, Jack and Michelle, for a great webinar today and for sharing your insights with everyone. Would like to thank everyone who attended for all the questions, comments, and for being engaged. And we would like to provide you an opportunity to experience this in your organization with our upcoming Extraordinary Coach webinar, which is a virtual workshop coming up in August. We will provide the registration link in our exit survey, so it will be there for you to be able to access. And if you'd like to continue any of the conversations, we will put that in the exit survey as well, and one of our team members will connect with you. And then lastly, by completing the exit survey, you will have a copy, access to a copy of the Extraordinary Coach ebook. So thank you again for your time and participation today, and have a great rest of your week.